Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Engine Breaking with myself and Tommo. My dogs are barking in the background just as I hit record, which is perfect. And we are joined by a very special guest this week. We are joined by none other than Rob Smedley. You all know him probably from his days at Ferrari, but he's a busy man. He's been doing lots of things recently, and he's here to tell us all about that. Rob, just quickly, if people aren't, maybe they're new to the sport, they're not fully aware of who you are, could you just give us like a brief intro to your road and the path you've taken and whatnot?
I can, Dan. I certainly can. First of all, thanks for having me. It's a great honour and a great pleasure to be talking to you guys today. So I started in Formula One back in ancient history, actually. So I started in Formula One in the mid-90s when the teams were not much more than 50 people, in fact, or a lot of the teams. In fact, I actually started at your old team. My first ever job in Formula One was at the Stewart Grand Prix team. So I was one of the guys in there in the first years of Stewart Grand Prix, and that was in I can't remember the address now, but it's the trading estate in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, Bradbourne Drive.
Bradbourne Drive, that's it. Bradbourne Drive, Tilbrook.
That's it.
Milton Keynes, still remember it. Yeah, it was just
probably
that
still
one.
smelt of cakes then, didn't it? Because it used to be an old cake factory, apparently.
It did. It smelt the cakes, and there was all sorts of other nefarious goings on in the other units, which now Red Bull has taken over the lot, hasn't it, with its new campus? So yeah, I started then. I was really fortunate, I think, when I started Formula One, because the teams were so small, so you could, you got involved with everything. So whether you're good or not, you kind of made rapid progress, which is probably what happened to me. And then, I spent some time at Stewart. I spent some time at Jordan Grand Prix, which in today's money is Aston Martin. Then I went to Ferrari. I was at Ferrari for 10 years. Latterly at Williams, always climbing the greasy pole, as it were. And then in 2019, I started my own engineering business. I started to do some fun stuff with that. So we've got an advanced technology business. We can get into all this later on. An advanced technology business, a sports analytics business, and something that is addressing the grassroots of the sport as well, to try to get more kids involved in the sport and education, and just generally trying to evangelize about our brilliant sport. So yeah, very busy, too busy in fact, but there you go.
Yeah,
it sounds like you've expanded outside of obviously the Formula One kind of niche. Was it quite? Obviously you've both worked in the sport and you've both kind of walked away from the sport to do other things. Do you both have quite similar stories as to like why you both stepped away primarily? I know obviously Dan, you won your world title, Dan, so you were like, I'm out.
Yeah, but there's a vast difference between what me and Rob are doing now. I'm sitting in a spare storeroom recording a podcast, right? And Rob's got an engineering business. So there's some similarities, but not much.
I'm picking you up, Dan. Come on, hype yourself, man. Come on.
Yeah, come on, Dan. Come on, big yourself up. So yeah, why did I? As I said, I was pretty lucky. In that I got into the sport, I was right place, right time. And I guess, my generation of engineers and scientists and mathematicians and physicists and stuff, we brought a lot of first principle and scientific thinking, back in that early mid-90s phase. And the teams were small enough that you could progress. So I ended up being in quite senior positions from fairly early on. And I got to a certain point in my life where there was a lot of things that I absolutely love about Formula One and continue to love and even miss. The adrenaline of the Saturday afternoon, the adrenaline of the Sunday afternoon, the competition, the teamwork with colleagues, that type of stuff. But then there's a lot of stuff which I just thought, well, I can take this or leave it. Hopping on or off a plane, almost, 30 times a year or whatever is not my idea of fun. Even though I probably do more of that now, actually. There you go. And I just thought to myself, I would like to do something different. I've been very lucky. I've been very fortunate. I would like to now try something different. And that's why I kind of stepped out of it at the start of 2019, which is still quite recent. I'd been fortunate in that, I'd gone through lots of different projects, got lots of medals and World Championship cups and pots and pans and all the rest of it, if that type of thing is important to you. Ticked all of those boxes. The Ferrari was a great period. Williams was an interesting period because it was something, Ferrari, we went through a period of domination. It was 7 World Championships in 10 years. Williams was a different project. It was, trying to fix something that, wasn't at the level of Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull. And we had some early success there, but then you kind of done the full cycle at that point. So you either continue to do it and end up as, possibly a team principal somewhere or something like that. Or you think, right, I want to do something different now. So I took the path of doing something different. I was also at the age where, my kids were starting big school and all of that type of good stuff. I'd missed just about every single wedding, funeral, bar mitzvah that you could think of over the last 20 years, and decided that, now was the time to start giving something back to my family as well, who'd supported me for a long, long time. Like you will know, Dan, long-suffering partners. That's what we have in Formula One, very supportive partners. And certainly I couldn't have, had the career 20-odd years in Formula One, at the coalface in Formula One, let's say, without a really supportive wife. So there you go. It was time to give something back to her as well.
Yeah, I think mine's probably more upset that I'm home more often now, to be honest with you, mate. But yeah, that's the same story everyone says. Everyone I've spoken to that's left, it's long-suffering partners and kids. So I completely get it, mate. And it's exactly, like I say, the reason I left as well, mate. So
cool.
Is there much that you two think the sport could do to? I mean, look, inherently you're away. Like, you're going to be away for up to 24 weekends a year. But like, obviously with rotating staff, I know that's a thing more so now. But is that just, maybe that is just something that unfortunately you kind of just have to accept as part of, it's a job with fantastic, privilege and some really amazing parts to it, but you just kind of have to accept that, I guess, right? Do you think there's much more that the sport could do?
Well, I mean, you're caught, between parts of the equation just don't add up, do they? And the teams, and I'm now advocating for the teams, if you like, because you're in the middle of a cost cap, which is a really good thing for the teams, but then we're adding more races in, which, more races means the only way you can cope with that without, absolutely ruining people is more people. You do get to the point where, this was something that I was actively involved in right at the very end in Williams, because I was trying to work out how we could do this. You get to the point where, we've already crossed over to mechanics in Formula One, are pretty much, they'll do, you might see them in the factory in January, you might see them in the factory a little bit in December, and apart from that, they're on the road. That's it. They don't actually come to, so they are, they if you like, their work-life balance is reasonable because of the fact that they spend a lot of time at home during the week. I think the guys who suffer are the guys who critically have to do every single event. So if you take the drivers, for example, and the drivers have been very vocal about this, the drivers have to do every single event. You can't sub a different driver in for 50% of the season. So they're away, they're doing all of the work. It's a physical job for them, physically, in terms of the jet lag, and in terms of it's really physical there, when they're having to drive the car. The other people are the engineers and the technicians, because a lot of them will do every single event. There's certain roles like the race engineer, for example. So the race engineer and the performance engineer, they have a one-to-one relationship directly with the with the driver, and therefore they're kind of destined to do every single event. So how does that work? How much time? What's the balance? Because usually as engineers, we're always desperate to get back to the factory and find another few milliseconds, or find out what went wrong or what's going to go right the next one, all the rest of it. So it's quite hard work for the engineers. I can say that from personal experience. But then, as you said, Tommo, there's a huge amount of upsides. It's not an easy one, to answer the original question. It's not an easy one to manage or to balance. It's pretty difficult, in fact.
Yeah. And I definitely have the moments where there are times where I think I don't miss it at all, and then I don't know, I'll watch it on telly or something, and I'll be like, I'd give anything to be in that garage again. To be getting deafened and have carbon dust blown in my face and all things like that. It's just like, oh yeah, I do miss that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the.
I was just going to say
the atmosphere.
Go on, Tommo.
I was just saying, at Silverstone last year, I was able to, as a fan who's always watched on telly, and I was able to go to Silverstone, and I was in the Red Bull garage actually for Q3, and just there was the atmosphere there was just something about it that was just, I don't know, it was really captivating. And maybe it's just because but I can imagine, everyone was so switched on. I was so impressed, like the level of fire alarm.
Fire alarm going off. Hang on.
Well, go and make sure you're safe, Rob, first and foremost.
Brilliant. That couldn't happen to any other podcast but ours. So while Rob goes and makes sure that his workshop isn't burning down, it seems like the perfect time to talk to you about our long-time sponsors of the show, NordVPN, and they are running a New Year's deal at the moment where you can save 64% and get an extra 4 free months on their 2-year plan, and they're also offering 40% off of their 1-year plan. And with all of that, they're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Check them out at nordvpn.com/engine.
So we're back.
Yeah. No smoke, no flames. You're all right.
Well, there's no smoke without fire, and there's no smoke.
All safe. You've got all your hair still. That's the main thing.
Hair on fire. You asked me before how many fire alarms went off was it a regular occurrence? I would say it was a minute by minute occurrence in Formula One. There's always a fire alarm. It's just a metaphorical fire alarm and fire to put out. Somebody's always got their hair or their pants on fire. It's pretty much the same here, actually. So yeah, there's always a fire alarm.
Yeah, I said to Tommo that there is a significantly more fire-related incidents when we had Renault engines than we did Honda. And
well, there you go.
Yeah, and that's all I'll say on that, because Cyril Abitable might come and hunt me down.
Yeah, get shot.
As a Hyundai guy now. He's moved on. Rob, I did actually, as we're talking about kind of facilities, I did want to ask you quite a specific question. We've heard a lot kind of this last year from James Vowles at Williams about their infrastructure and how, the CapEx has been increased to try and catch up. Having worked at a team like Ferrari, and even, when you were at Stewart Jordan, and a team like Williams, how far behind, or how far have Williams got to go to kind of catch up with the top teams in terms of kind of infrastructure? Like how far behind are they? Because it's hard for us as fans to really understand that.
It's yeah. I mean, James is absolutely right. They're massively behind. That was our. When there was a group of us who went there at the start of 2014, so myself, Pat Simmons, and our evaluation immediately, Pat had come from, in the recent past, Renault, which was a World Championship winning team, at that point in the not too distant past. I'd come from Ferrari that just come out of a World Championship winning period. And we, at Ferrari, we accepted that there were certain areas in terms of infrastructure and capability that we weren't as far ahead as some of the other teams. There was others where we thought we were further ahead, of course, which is always the premise of a top team. But the stark contrast of Williams at that point compared to Ferrari, I had exactly the same. The evaluation, the appraisal of the situation was there was certain, let's call it, infrastructure, or there were certain elements of capability that were 20 years behind, literally 20 years behind. So what does that mean in real term? Because, we talk about that and you say, well, what does that actually mean? So, in Formula One, the only thing that matters, or certainly the KPI with the heaviest weighting above anything else is your relative lap time, right? Because if your lap time is faster than everybody else's on the grid, then everything is good. So how do you create lap time? You create lap time from car performance and relative car performance, and you create relative car performance from capability. So it's how fast can you build capability, be that wind tunnel, CFD methodologies, design methodologies, manufacturing methodologies, and capability. All of these things count, right? IT, systems, infrastructure, all of that counts. All of them, there's no one single magic bullet, silver bullet that is going to help you to be dominant like Red Bull are today, or Mercedes were before that, or Ferrari was, when I was there. There's no one thing. It's just a case of building, relatively better capability in lots of areas. And if you're behind, so if your wind tunnel is slightly less efficient, or your aerodynamic design capabilities are slightly, they correlate slightly worse than another team because of the capabilities, because of the infrastructure that you have in that area, you're going to be behind, right? If your tyre modelling or your simulator, Alpine were in the media quite recently talking about their new simulator facility, which is a capability upgrade, right? It's one thing. It won't change everything for them, but it will make a big difference. How does it make a difference? Let's concentrate on that example. It makes a difference because when they think about, when they come up with a direction of travel for the car performance, they can go and test that on a simulator. If your simulator correlates slightly worse than McLaren simulator or Ferrari simulator, then you're going to get a slightly less correlated answer. You're going to get a slightly worse answer, which can lead you off down a garden path. It can lead you off down the wrong path. One of and there was just all of these points that, where Williams needed to have made, should have made, let's say, in the preceding decade, a huge capital expenditure or capital investment into all of these areas. It's not an operating expenditure; it's capital. You're building new wind tunnels. You're buying and deploying new computational fluid dynamic clusters. You're doing all of these things that raise the bar of what you're able to achieve. Without that, then you're 10 years, 15 years, 20 years behind, and to catch that up is very, very difficult. It's hugely difficult. You've almost got to start with a clean sweep. It goes back to, again, let's talk about what is a real term example. A team like Williams, when I was there, we had to lock in the chassis design so early in the year compared to a top team, and that was because of the manufacturing capability, because of the speed of manufacture. So, for example, to manufacture the chassis took, X% longer than Ferrari.
And what that meant was that you then had to lock in your fundamental design for the next year's car much earlier in the year than, say, a Ferrari or a Mercedes or a Red Bull. What that meant was that Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull had another, let's call it 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, it doesn't really matter, but a significant amount of chunk more time where they could continue to develop their fundamental car before they had to lock in the design and then start the manufacture. So all of these things, none of them, there's no one single silver bullet, but all of these things a team like Williams now has to contend with because, they're behind the curve in so many places. I read James, go back to James Vowles. He was saying the other day that he was very buoyed by the fact that they were 7th in the World Championship this year. And as you start to deploy all of these new capability upgrades, let's say, in your design and development, then, that's going to bode pretty well for them for the future, assuming that they can get it across the line and they can get it right. It's still a massive, uphill struggle for them. But hopefully that's given you a bit of insight into what we talk about when we talk about capability and capex and all of that good stuff.
Well, I think 2019 really highlighted that, didn't it? The car was not only kind of the slowest car on the grid, but also it was late. It was like a day and a half late to testing, and I guess that it wasn't just that they developed a rocket ship and they were just a bit late with it. They kind of dropped it on both sides in terms of getting the car. I mean, we don't often. I can't remember the last time before that we'd seen a car kind of not make day one of testing. I guess that's where it came to a head, right?
Yeah, certainly did. Anyway, that's
7th now, 5 years later, pretty good. So we'll take that, Williams fans.
Good, yes, of course. Come on, Williams.
Great morale boost in there, Tommo.
Thank you. You're welcome. I just love Alex Albon. Sorry, he's my favourite, so I've got to rep. I've got to prop him.
So let's have a little chat about, we talked about the past. Let's have a chat about your new venture, this global karting league. And we've just come talking about money and everything in F1. And money's quite a significant part of karting as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, we start from the premise that given how expensive, and there's no question about this, right? It's not as if there's a debate that grassroots motorsport is expensive or not. Grassroots motorsport is expensive, right? And if you don't accept that as a premise, you really do have your head in the clouds, right? You're not of this planet. Grassroots motorsport, and any motorsport, is horrendously expensive. So what that does is it sets up a barrier, which just means that there's only a certain proportion of the world can actually participate in competitive grassroots motorsport, and especially the pathway that will get them to Formula One or professional motorsports even. So our premise is this. Given that, we think that it's more than likely that the fastest racing driver ever has never actually sat in a racing car. Yeah? It's like if you took a tiny demographic of the world and you allowed them to play football. So you took a tiny percentage of the world and you allowed them to play football, right? And that percentage, that tiny demographic, just happened to be from ultra-high net worth backgrounds, right? So where's Messi come from? Where's Neymar come from? Where's Maradona come from? Where's Paul Gascoigne come from? Where's David Beckham come from? All of these kids from normal backgrounds who just happen to be the world's greatest footballers, they don't get to play, right? So our premise is very simply based on that. So we looked at, well, what do we do to make this more accessible? So how do we remove the complexity? How do we remove the cost? And there's lots of different things that we've done over the last however many years it is, but we basically introduced Global Karting League, and Global Karting League is something that we are already actively running successfully in the UK. So they're electric karts, they run within an operating model, and even though there's still a cost to go and doing this, relatively, depending on the level of karting that you're looking at, we've taken around 80-90% of the cost out of it, which is a significant chunk, right? And this is a first off. Now what we want to do is, now that we've proved the model in the UK and are continuing to have growth in the UK, and we're investing in that further for the 2024, so this season. So we'll have new karts and bigger grids and all the rest of that good stuff. Now what we want to do is we're going to roll that out globally. So we're in the middle of that. So we want to get this in 2 more places internationally. So we're going to drop leagues, if you like, in 2 places around the world during 24 as a minimum. And then we want to build on that. The ambition is that we want to get to 50 global sites around the world within the next 5 years. We want to have, reached 1 million kids across that period who are participating in grassroots sport. And we want to find talent. We not only want to get 1 million kids involved in the sport, the organic output of that, because we've basically 1,000x'd. We've got 1,000 times more kids taking part in the sport. There's 2 outputs. One is 1,000 kids enjoying the sport, getting involved in the sport, building a community, being educated, and the other output is that there will be within that million kids that we have reach and participate. We'll find some real talent. Of course we will. It's a numbers game. It's mathematically, statistically probable that we will find talent there. And already in the UK, we're finding talent from, let's call it, atypical backgrounds. So they're not from the high net worth families. They're from, the lower socioeconomic bands, but they can pedal, they can drive, and these kids deserve a chance. These kids should be allowed to participate. These kids should be allowed to show their wares, and see if there is a pathway for them beyond Global Karting League to get into the higher echelons, into cars and beyond. So look, it's something that I'm super passionate about. We've got 3 separate businesses here. It's something that I do dedicate most of my time to, because I want to see it succeed. Because I think that, with the backing of the governing bodies, so here in the UK, the ASN, Motorsport UK, who've been, always very supportive of what we're doing, the global governing body, the FIA, who are, equally supportive and interested in what we're doing, especially rolling this out globally to find talent. I think, all together we can actually make a difference here, and I'm passionate about making a difference. I know what it looks like at the very top of the sport, and given that I've worked up here for 25 years now or whatever, it's also I've made a lot of friends and created a big network of people that can help. So it's together we will be able to make a difference. If everybody gets behind this, we'll be able to make a difference. But up to now, I'm really enjoying it. It's great, and it's great seeing kids from, as I said, from non-standard backgrounds, if you like, coming through and enjoying it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the subject that I've increasingly kind of, as I've engrossed myself in this industry, become more and more like, the story of like Estban Ocon is an example, is a very admirable example where, his dad had a mechanics and they lived above it, and they sold the shop to literally they went all in on Ocon's, on their dream, and they just lived in a little motorhome and drove around Europe going to karting races. But it's like, if Estban hadn't made it, they would have sacrificed everything and they would have lost their, like, I struggle when, love this sport, right? But young kids who want to get involved, I struggle recommending being like, you should try and be a racing driver, because you have to spend so much money. And if you're, if you want to be a professional footballer, right, and you invest everything, all your time into it, and it doesn't work out, you've not spent all right, money, having parents taking you around the country to football matches. Outside of that, you've not spent a lot of money. I mean, top tier karting, I'm hearing numbers of, $250,000 a year at the very, very top, which is just, it's ridiculous. Even if you've got a millionaire parent, that's still not enough. So that's why I think I love the sound of it. I want to understand, Rob, I guess more the specifics around what are the really expensive parts of traditional karting that you're doing differently? How exactly are you reducing these costs? Is it the chassis? Is it the tyres? Is it what are the main things, I guess, you're addressing with the Global Karting League?
Yeah, I mean, there's two elements to it. To be honest, so we drive. So we've the engineering company here has designed and developed our own powertrain. So we modify a chassis. So we take a chassis from our chassis partner, which is Birrell in Italy. So it's a proper racing kart. It's a proper racing chassis, and then we modify that to basically for as an installation for our electric powertrain. And then the electric powertrain gives you all the same driving feeling, if you like, of the petrol karts. We've worked very, very hard, as you can imagine. There's a bunch of ex-Formula One engineers, here in this business. We worked very, very hard to get the mass down, get the power up, the torque up, all the rest of it. So you've worked really hard on the performance. But one of the things that we've worked doubly hard on is parity, because one of the problems in karting, which is why it gets so expensive, is that in the traditional route of karting is power parity. So somebody can go and buy an engine which is just slightly better, and that slightly better engine, 0.2, 0.3 horsepower or whatever, it's going to make a massive difference in terms of lap time. And that's the problem with traditional karting as well, is that it's not always easy to see who the best kids are, because if you're spending a lot and you've got a huge engine bill, then you're probably going to have the best engines. And you hear this all the time when you wander around, not that I make a habit of wandering around karting paddocks, but when I do kind of hang out at some of these venues, you hear it all the time. The parents will talk to me and say, oh well, we would be doing great, but we just can't afford the engines. So the engines are this whole thing of lack of parity that causes increases the costs a lot. Then there's the operational model, if you like. So going to a 3-day event with numbers of tires and being part of a team and all the rest of it, it all adds up, right? There's no single element that it all adds up. So we've just looked. It's like when we talked about Formula One technical capability before, or technical dominance. There's no single thing. It's just taking cost out of all of these elements and then having control over it as well. So it's an arrive and drive system, which actually we find, the feedback that we get from the parents is great, because it takes all the complexity out. So what you do is, you bring your kid, you have to have, your helmet and your overalls and that type of stuff. And then everything else is taken care of by Global Karting League. So the whole event runs without intervention from parents or without particular knowledge, or everything is kind of laid on. But what that does, as a perception, it means that there's no complexity to it. What it really does is it gives us ultimate control over how the events run, and therefore what the costs are. And that's really, really important, because if you just, if we kind of built these super duper electric carts and give them to people, they'd still find ways of spending money. Whereas if we control the perimeter of how you spend money, we then are able to get the costs down to where we've got them down now. So, there's lots of different elements to it, but it's pretty cool. We're enjoying it.
It sounds really interesting. Really interesting. What are you thinking, Dan? You going to get your little one in a Global Karting League?
He's 2 at the minute, right? And he has got absolutely no hand-eye coordination. I think he's probably going to be more like
Project Verstappen. Start them early.
He's going to be more like his dad and think just doing something in the background. I think he's more suited to that, bless him. But we'll see. And then my daughters are more interested in horses. If you can do a global karting league around horses to bring the cost down for that, Rob, I'm all in.
Global horsing league.
Horsepower.
Yeah. But the engine parity is very important, because every time we go karting, I always say I've got the Duff engine because I'm always at the back.
Oh, mate.
It's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm
It's
on the
the
wrong
first
side
excuse.
of 100 kilos. It's got nothing to do with that, right? It's all because I always get the Duff cart.
Honestly, that is always the case. Rob, you know what? I'd read a little bit about it beforehand, but I think this is exactly what I think. This, in combination with, I think how sim racing is becoming a bigger part of, obviously the simulators, like you said previously, Alpine, how that makes a difference to a top team, but also simulator rigs you can have at home as a kid. You can use that to. Max and Lando do a lot of racing, and there's no doubt in my mind that part of the reason Max is so good on restarts is because of how much practice he gets in iRacing. And I think a combination of making, obviously, the real racing, that has to be, front and centre, but the combination of a more cost-efficient way of going racing, both in real life and at home in your rig, I think... It sounds good, mate. It sounds. What are we talking? What kind of reduction in cost are we talking, percentage-wise, just relative to, I guess, the pre-existing model? Is it potentially like half the cost, a third?
Well, it depends where you are, right? Because if you say, entry level karting of cadet or junior racing, by the time you've bought the equipment and towed it around the company and and done all the events, even if you do it on a shoestring, you're still looking at 20 grand, I would have thought, to do it through the traditional route. You very quickly get up to spending 50 grand. If you're going to actually take part in championships and run round, you're very quickly up to 50 grand. If you're going to do national championships, we're talking more like 100 grand. And then you alluded to the fact that at the very top, the European and World Championships are 250 grand. So, it depends where you where you pitch that. But you can do a season of racing with Global Karting League, depending on how much, how many of the practice days you do and all the rest of it. But, you can start off at around about £3,000. And if you really hammered it, you'd be up to about £5,000. So, the discrepancy between the people who can just about afford to do the minimum amount and those that can, the families that can afford to be out all the time is nowhere near the size of what it is, through the traditional route. So we always talk about we've taken 96% out, and that's because we pitch it at what would be a national level of karting, if you like. So 100 grand. So we say, 100 grand to do national level through the traditional route. For us, it's more like 5. So, it's 95% or whatever. But I guess the other nice thing is for, there's a huge market in the leisure karting industry. So all the companies around the UK that, have some competitive element with their leisure karting. There's lots of, single circuits, and there's companies that have, there's businesses that have, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 sites around the UK that you can go to. What happens is that the kids who go and do that, they all want to go and do something, they want to try the competitive, the outdoor stuff. The single biggest problem for the parents is that we'll go back to it, that word, capex. There's a load of capital investment that the parents are. You've got to buy all the equipment. You've got to buy something to tow it around from home to the factory. Mum or dad's got to learn how to spanner the thing. There's a load of complexities to it. The beauty of what we do is it's arrive and drive, right? So it's almost like the leisure karting model, but for outdoor karting, outdoor competitive karts that are doing, 60 mile an hour. So you turn up, you pay your weekend fee. If son or daughter doesn't like it, that's it. You haven't lost the 10 grand that you would have lost if you'd have had to kind of had all this initial capital outlay. So there's lots of benefits to doing it. Most of the customer retention that we have is crazy because most of the kids love it, right? They come and try it. They're like, oh my God, these karts are like rocket ships. I'm racing kids on outdoor circuits. It's brilliant. I'm loving it. And they'll come back. Hence why we're having to build more karts this year to accommodate them all.
And one of the things people speak a lot about is the female representation in karting and things like that. Have you seen an increase in female representation at this sort of karting level? Is there more girls getting interested in the sport?
Certainly, it's a great point, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. The whole thing, the whole premise of Global Karting League, because of what it's about, should the organic output, but it's a designed organic output, if you like, is to increase diversity within the driving community or within the grassroots community. And one of the areas where we have a significant lack of diversity is gender, basically. So between males and females, statistics show that at the very top of the percentage, there's about in karting, there's about 12% females, something like that. It's usually a little bit less than that, down at 8-9%. And we've gathered all of the data and done all the statistics ourselves, so I'm pretty confident of those numbers. What we're seeing is, because we're creating a slightly more modern and safe space, then we're attracting more females, especially at the ages from 12 upwards. So what was really nice last year, and I want to keep pushing this harder and harder and harder, but at times we had 30-35% female representation, which is not at the 50-50 that we want to get it to. But it's definitely making good inroads, and again, I think that's because it's something fresh, it's something modern. The karts are electric. It's not like, oh well, this is the traditional stuff. It's the premise of the boys. It's dad and lad. You talk to anyone and they'll say, oh, what do you do? Do you do with traditional? You go down the teams route, or it's dad and lad? Well, why does it have to be dad and lad? Why can't it be mum and girl? Right? It's 2024, for goodness sake, right? Let's be slightly more open-minded about where the world is. And I think that, we want to push definitely that area and that lack of diversity. We're working with other businesses as well. We work directly with More Than Equal. We made that announcement. We are their data partner. It was a great initiative, which is, again, one of these great initiatives like F1 Academy, like all of those initiatives that are trying to get females involved in motorsport. We're right behind it. We are firmly of the belief, or we're firmly of the belief that we believe in the hypothesis that females should be as competitive as males, and there's no reason why there can't be a female Formula One World Championship. So let's, that might be wrong, but let's try and prove it. At the minute, nobody's, up to now, nobody's actually had a go at disproving that. So, working with DC and all the guys at David Coulthard and all the guys at More Than Equal. Same with F1 Academy, all of these initiatives, Global Karting League, we should be all trying to get more females in motorsport. Once we get to that 50-50 balance, or somewhere near 50-50 balance, up at the top end, then we'll see. So really looking forward to the journey.
Yeah, I mean, even like you say, it's not 50-50, but 30-35, that's massive considering where it used to be.
Yeah,
like you'd see one girl over a whole weekend or whatever, and it would be like, oh my God, there's a girl here, sort of thing. But yeah, 30-35, that is a market improvement.
Yeah. And we're not, we don't want to rest on that. We want it to be 30-35 consistently, and then we want to get it to 40, and eventually we want to get it to 50. It's pretty clear what our objectives are. But that's not the only underrepresented community that we want in the sport as well. there's lots of great initiatives across motorsport that have popped up over the last 5-10 years or whatever. We're completely agnostic in that, there's no positive bias to us for any community or another. It's just, this is open to everybody. Let's just come and get involved. This is not the premise. This shouldn't be the premise of just the privileged few. This should be, motorsport should be open and accessible. The real competitive grassroots bit should be open and accessible to everybody, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, because I think, again, giving kids opportunity to showcase their ability will hopefully enable teams to then spot them and then be able to bring them through the system, right? Because it's the socioeconomic kind of barrier that exists, even just kind of in the UK. But then you roll that out to the rest of the world, where there's plenty of regions in the world that have rarely see drivers representing that nation because that, whether that's a lack of tracks, whether it's the high cost or whatever. And hopefully, long term, if you can roll this out worldwide and make it at least, karting and entry-level racing is never going to be as accessible as football, because you just pick up a ball and do kick-ups in your back garden. And there's always going to be a degree of finance. It's always going to be more expensive than a lot of other sports, but the way it seems right now is just completely unsustainable. It's very pay to win, like you say, with engines. Like, if you can just bring that system in and control it and homologate it all a bit more. I know MBS was quoted recently saying about how he wants to, through the FIA, help bring karting expense down a bit. And I think it's I want to be able to say to you, like, you should try and you should go for it, because you're not going to potentially put your family into financial ruin by going for it. And because just kick a ball around if there's that risk. But I want to be able to encourage kids, and I'd have, if something like this existed when I was a kid, I'd been all over it, Rob. So good luck with it, man.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
And as well, I understand that Idris Elba is also working alongside, or has, with his total, was it his Speed Academy? Has that got playing into this?
DJ Big Driss. So Idris and I so Idris is, as well as being a really solid guy, he is somebody who, like me, wants some way to give back. And you twin that with the fact that he's also like a petrol head, right? He loves motor racing. So we kind of got together, got our heads together and said, well, what do we do? And he said, well, why I'd really like to have like this Speed Academy. And why don't we have a bunch of kids? Why don't we go out to so what you're doing, Rob, is great. But exactly as Thomas just said, we can only get the price point down to a certain point. We talked about it. It's relatively, it's 95% cheaper. It's 3-4 grand a season. It's still 3-4 grand, right? Which a lot of families don't have. So you can never democratize motorsport as far as you can with football. Exactly like you just said, Tommo, or a ball sport. Something that you go to your local sports shop and buy a 25 quid pair of trainers and run around the park throwing a ball or kicking a ball, something like that, right? So there's always going to be a certain barrier to this. So what we said was, well, why don't we start looking at the kids that can't afford that, right? So what we did was we did an event at the Formula E race in London, where we basically, Idris did a tweet. It was dead simple. We put it together in about 6 weeks. It wasn't quite simple. We had then our respective teams of people with their hair on fire, probably saying, I hate these two people. Why do they always give us these impossible tasks? Anyway, Idris does a tweet, says, who wants to be the next Formula One driver? Come down and to the XL for the Formula E race. Get involved. We were basically, because it's Idris and he's got, I don't know, like 950,000 million followers on Twitter or whatever. Basically, all these kids then apply. And we were actually focusing on, we wanted to, for the first inaugural Speed Academy, focus on kids from London, because that's, his hometown. So he did a tweet. All these kids then came down, and we filtered these kids out. We found the top 12 kids in the 3 age categories, and we put them into the 2023, if you like. So they were paid academy kids, if you like. We got some funding for it. We're looking for funding for 2024 and 2025, by the way, if I'm allowed to plug that.
Go for it, mate.
And we put those kids into the 2023 GKL championship. Now we'll continue to do that. So we're doing more events. There's some really exciting announcements coming up about who we're going to be partnering with soon. But we want to keep doing this as a year on year. And we not only want to do it in the UK, Idris Elba Speed Academy. So Idris Elba Speed Academy, the kids will always race in GKL, in the GKL championship. But we not only want to do it in the UK, we want to do it in other territories as well. So wherever there's a GKL territory, we will be taking, the less privileged kids, or the kids that can't afford the price point. And each year we'll be doing activations and events to look for those kids and to bring them into that local GKL championships. And if they're good enough, they'll progress. They can progress all the way through the system and from local championships to national championships to regional to eventual world championships. And we'll continue to support them. So it's a great initiative. It's really good to have, somebody like Idris on board, because he's, not only the star power that he brings, but he's a great guy and has a massive heart as well, and is really passionate about this. So, it's nice that we've kind of joined up and got this thing rolling along now.
Now, I can't promise anything, but on the off chance that for some reason we've got someone with a lot of money listening, and if they want to help with the funding, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
Now you're asking me like an admin question that nobody ever asks me. But I think if you go on the Global Karting League website, there is a thing there, get in touch. So
contact form.
Do that. Yeah, sorry, that's really vague, isn't it? No, top salesman.
Don't worry about it. We're not media and marketing. We come from a different area, mate. I know how it is.
I feel like I've, for the years I've been doing this, I've had so many conversations about entry level racing, and this is the most hope I've ever had coming out of a conversation. So yeah, it's good luck with it, Rob. I'd love to be in some way involved as well, because I think it's a really admirable thing you're doing. Because this sport has been like, it's fundamentally, it's rich old boys club when it started in the 50s, and for a sport actually that doesn't is so difficult to access, I think it's cultivated a very wide breadth kind of in terms of the fan base. There's people from all kinds of backgrounds. You go to an F1 race and it's, you see in every type of person under the sun, which is an amazing thing. And I think anything we can do to actually, make that same level of diversity, be that racial diversity, be that gender, be that socioeconomic, if we can actually reflect that in the racing itself, then, because I think the sport's still got a long way to go in that instance, quite clearly. But sounds like something like this could be the part of the solution, maybe. Yeah, that's all we can hope for, Tommo, is that we're part of the solution, right? I don't want to kind of sit here and pontificate that we are the solution to everything, but we're part of the solution. So, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this expand. It will succeed because we will make it succeed, definitely.
Yeah, and I see. Obviously, there's a bunch of dates for some UK events on the website, Tommo. So maybe we could. Get our cameras out and have a little day out, mate.
Let's 100%. I'm 100% up for it, because I love kart. So now I'm an adult and I earn my own money. I'm like, I just want a kart as much as possible, because I couldn't when I was a kid. That's literally like, I'm just so happy. I went PFI for a stag do and I got absolutely soaked, and I was so happy. It was like the happiest I've ever been to be soaked. It was brilliant. I love it.
I hate to break it to you, Tommo, but unfortunately, mate, I think you're a bit big for Bambino class now, mate.
What do you mean? How dare you, Daniel?
We'll just I'll tell you what, we can take my son, right? So we can get the wives on board. They'll think we're doing something great. It's just, day out.
Yeah, it's for the kids.
You're welcome,
it's not
guys.
For us.
Whenever you want. Whenever you want.
We'll make that happen 100%. Definitely. Let's do it.
So before we let you go, Rob, we have possibly one of the most important segments we do on this show. And it started off as a joke. However, loads of people keep contacting me and telling me this is the most important thing now, part of the show. Me and Blake, obviously, working in motorsport and F1, we've been around, we've been to a few circuits, we know the lay of the land. We ask everyone that's been in a similar position for their best toilet facilities and worst toilet facilities at a track. So, just to set the scene, I think the worst, right, Barcelona pit lane toilets. Possibly toss up between Barcelona and Brazil.
I'm trying to remember Brazil. Where are the ones in Brazil? I can't even remember. This is now like a really weird conversation, by the way, Dan. Like that, where
I said we weren't
conveniences.
We don't do normal things here, right? Blake, when he was last at Brazil, he remembers using the facilities at Brazil, and somebody stole a urinal and just walked out with it. And I was just like, yeah, that kind of,
that can happen.
Right. So, can I start with the best?
Yeah.
So the best,
pro.
I think. I've got one, but I'm just trying to make sure that there's none which are better. So the best one, I reckon, is Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
That's quite high up on our list. We get that a lot.
Yeah, in them little team buildings or whatever they're called. And you've got little showers in there, and they're very nice. I mean, because I consider myself to be almost professional level marathon runner. I mean, I've never run more than about 6-7K in my life, but if I was to run a marathon, I'd be pretty good. So I like to run around the circuits. I was one of those goons, and still do now, actually. And so if you've got a nice shower facility, that's always very welcome. Definitely, and I hope nobody from the Circuit de Catalunya is listening, but certainly, like Barcelona, you are very much correct. It's like they've obviously had the architects and civil engineers out to say, well, how can we possibly do this as bad as what's the worst toilet we can design? So they've done a pretty good job of that. Where else? I'm trying to think where else. I mean, the old ones at... so when you got the old school circuit, so the ones in... So do you remember the old pit lane in Silverstone?
Yeah.
I can say that because it's no longer, the Formula 1 pit lane. So the old ones in Silverstone were pretty special. So back in the day, what we used to wait till people went in there. There used to be a gap. So it was like, it's in the garage. It's built out of breeze blocks. And it's just like a single toilet with a toilet in, right? So we used to wait for people to go in, and then the dag men, so the composite guys, used to lay a trail of, there's a gap up like that, about an inch below the door. We used to lay a trail of talcum powder or whatever, white powder they could get their hands on. And then we used to get the air hose and squirt it underneath the door. So if you're in there, it's a big plume of what? I'm sure there'll be some lung specialist who will now, report me and your podcast, and you'll get taken off air and never allowed to.
Oh, don't worry, mate. Don't worry about that. But we had to use those pits for one of the filming days back at Red Bull, and we did something similar, but we used the dry ice and the leaf blower.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty cold anyway, right? Because it was February, but we thought, let's just enhance the temperature by chucking some dry ice and the leaf blower through it. But
I was going to say, you're going to make the poor person shit themselves, but I was like, well, that's the exact place you want to be if you're going to shit yourself.
Mate, I wouldn't recommend it.
And also, Catalonia's not. Well, it might not be on the calendar for much longer. So maybe that's why.
This is the reason
finally,
why.
Yeah, enough negative feedback about the toilet. They're like, fine, we'll go to Madrid. Sod it.
Yeah, but speaking of running around the circuits as well, you don't get an appreciation. Right, I know I'm not athletically built, right? People know this, but I did.
Stop it.
I did run round Catalonia once at winter testing. Once is the key word here. And you don't appreciate the elevation changes and things like that at circuits until you run it or walk it, and then you're like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I think where the ones that I did run, I tended to pick and choose. So there was like Spa. Spa's just like a nightmare. I tried that once and I thought, well, this is not a very good game at all because it's just ridiculous and I'm going to end up either dead or hospitalised. The other one, which is like crazy steep, is so there's two actually. So one is Austin. Austin, that going up to turn one is, I would say, an understatement would say it's uncomfortable, it's horrible, and you get to the point where you're walking. And the other one where I did actually walk, and I remember this very clearly because Jensen passed me. Jensen Button ran past me and made some negative comment about my running skills, which, much to my chagrin. So is A1, I almost called it A1 ring, showing my age, Red Bull ring. So Red Bull ring up at turn 2, which is the second of the hairpin at the top of the hill. My God, that is steep. It's so steep. It's literally like you're struggling to walk up there. And gents came past. And, all right, mate, I'm struggling.
Beautiful views, though, while you're out of breath.
Oh,
beautiful views, yeah,
unreal.
Beautiful views.
Yeah, I was there last season. I was sat at turn 2, 3, whatever it's called, when on the sprint day when Max squeezed Checo after Checo squeezed Max on the straight, and it was stunning. It's best place in the world to watch F1. Loved it. But yeah, very steep.
High, aren't you? You're very high up. I mean, I don't know what your mental state was at that point, but you're very high.
I'd had a few bevies, Rob, I'll be honest. I'd had a few, but I was all right.
Good stuff.
Well, Rob, thank you for indulging in our humble little podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you,
You're
mate.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for your time.
I'm sorry that we got held up by our fire alarm here. Yeah.
Like I say, mate, it's very on brand for us. We're fine. But yeah, no, thank you for your time, mate, and hopefully we shall get ourselves to one of these global karting events and get ourselves a little video out. We'll let Tommo do that side.
I'd love to hear more about. I'm the video man. No, I'd definitely love to hear more about that, and potentially, let's get down. Let's get me, you, and Blake. Get some F1 people down. Get some talking about it as well, right? Because I feel like this is again, I feel very fulfilled by this conversation because I've kind of almost given up hope that motorsport is ever going to be accessible, but maybe it can be.
It will be. But you're right, guys. We need people like you and everybody else to be, getting behind it, evangelising about it. We won't do it on our own, but we will do it if the community help us. So everybody's got a part to play.